Hello. Just going to wait for a few people to join. So, I hope you're all well. Today we're going to be doing a short grammar explanation. Talking about... Hiya! Thanks for joining. So today we're going to be doing a short grammar explanation about how to use although, even though, though, in spite of, despite, and despite the fact that. Okay? So we're going to talk about this. It's hiya, thanks for joining. How are you? Hope you're well. So we're going to talk about these because they are used to show contrast, and they're useful to know and to understand, and to know the structures of how to use them when you're writing. Okay? So basically all of these, I'll type them up here, all of these are used to show contrast, so two contrasting ideas, which is like to show a difference. So they have the same idea, but they are used differently. Okay, so we have even though, hello, even though, ooh, although, though, which is the same. It's just though is less formal, used more in conversation. Hiya. In spite of, despite, and we can also say despite the fact that, which is just a long-winded way of saying the same. Okay, so I was just going to do a short grammar bit and explain how to use them. So they all show contrast, so they are all used for the same reason. Okay, there's no difference in the meaning, but you have different structures after the different words. So if we're using even though or although, we use them followed by the subject and the verb, so a clause. Okay, so for example, you could say, even though it rained, we still had a good time. Okay, so you have to follow it with a subject and a verb, like, and you can use them either way round. So you say, we had a good time even though it rained, or even though it rained, we had a good time. So it's a contrasting idea, because you might think if it was raining, you wouldn't have a good time, so it shows the contrast. And they can go at the beginning or in the middle. And that is the same for even though, Myrtle, although, or though. So I'll give you this example sentence with even though. We still had a good time. Okay, to show the contrast. And you could do the same with although.
Mommy, I can't put my earphones on. I need help. Mom, I need help putting my earphones on.
Come here then. Okay.
Help putting my earphones on. Help putting my...
Okay, so that one's at the beginning, but you can also put both of those in the middle, and I say you can use though as well. Though is the same meaning, but would be probably more conversational than written. Okay, especially if it was a formal piece of writing, you would use even though or although. Even though can add slightly more emphasis if you want to split hairs, as we say, if you want to be picky. Even though even though it rained, we still had a good time. It's slightly more emphatic, okay? But it's a small difference, okay?
Can you help me to put my earphones on?
No, I can't. You'll have to do it.
I need help. I can't.
Sorry. Martha's struggling with her headphones. So we still had a good time, although it rained. Or even though. Okay. They're fairly straightforward and just used as a normal clause. Okay? Pretty easy. Then we have in spite of and despite. And again, they they are the same. They show contrast. They can be used to give the same meaning as although and even though, but you have to use them in a different form. Okay, so it's what comes after the word that is important to get the structure correct. So when you have in spite of or despite, it has to be followed by a noun or the verb ing. Okay, so in spite of the rain, we still had a good time. Or I'll give you a different sentence because it's the same sentence. In spite of my headache, I don't know, I still enjoyed myself. There you go. Okay. So there you have in spite of plus a noun. And you can also say in spite of having a headache. Ooh. So then you're following it with ing form. And it's the same meaning. Okay. Okay, so they're the same meaning, different structure, and you can use that same form for in spite of and despite. And it makes no difference. So you have in spite of or despite plus a noun or plus the verb ing. Okay, and again they can be used either way round. So you can say I still had a good time in spite of having a headache, or in spite of having a headache I still had a good time. So you can use them either way round, and you can use despite and in spite of in the same way. Okay, I'll just give you one just so you know for your notes. Okay, so the other thing is that you can say despite, you don't have to say this, it's that you might hear people saying it. It's just another way of saying the same thing. But we say despite the fact that. And you can, this is the same for in spite of as well. So in spite of the fact that, or despite the fact that, and then you follow it with subject and verb again. Okay. Again, it's just another way of showing contrast. Maybe this is slightly stronger, slightly more emphasis, but and then you follow it with a subject and a verb. Okay, so you follow it in the same way. And again, it can go at the beginning or it can go at the middle. So in spite of the fact that it rained, I still had a good time. I still had a good time in spite of the fact that it rained. It's just a longer way of saying the same thing. But it's good to know these things, because you hear other people saying them or you read it, you wonder what it means. It means the same thing. Okay? Oh, that's... So, in spite of the fact that... It's very long-winded, isn't it? Rained. I still had a good time. Or you can do it the other way around. Okay, so in spite of the fact that it rained, I still had a good time. I still had a good time in spite of the fact that it rained. Just a much longer version. Oh, hi Marina, how are you? Good to see you. So, these things all have the same meaning. They all show contrast, and it's just good to know what they are followed by. So you have although, even though, and in spite of the fact that. You follow them with the subject and then the verb. Okay? And you can use them at the beginning or in the middle. So even though it rained, we had a good time. We had a good time even though it rained. And that's the same for although, though, and in spite of the fact that. And then you have despite and in spite of, and they are followed by a noun or the verb ing. And again, they can be used at the beginning or the middle. So in spite of the rain, we had a good time. In spite of having a headache, I had a good time. Okay, you can use them either way, and in the middle or at the beginning. Okay, so that's it. But the reason for knowing them. So again, you can use one when you're speaking, when you're talking. If you think I don't want to remember all of these. But it's good to understand the difference in structures for when you're reading, for your writing, if you're writing essays, so that you use different vocabulary, so you're not always using although or always using even though or whichever. So you can use a range of vocabulary. And also, if you're planning on taking exams, it's important to know these because, for example, if we do the, I don't know, so if you're taking FCE exam, or IELTS exam, any of these, they all ask you for an essay question, and often these essays ask you to show contrast. Okay, so it's good to know how to use different forms so you can show variation in your writing. You also have in these exams you have use of English questions. In FCE, in the writing section, you have use of English. So in those questions, they ask you, often they give you like a block of writing. You've probably done these exercises before. And they ask you to choose the best word to fit in the space. Okay, so they might give the option of although or despite as two of your options. Like they might, I don't know, although, despite, or however, whatever. They might give you 3 words or 4 words. And if you know the structure that follows, then you can be certain of which word to put in. So if it's a choice of although or despite, if after it's a noun or ing form, you know it has to be despite. Or if after it's a verb and a subject, you know it has to be although. So when you're practicing for exams, it's good to know what, for the use of English, it's good to know what follows words. So again, things like dependent prepositions are important to know. So like, you know, I don't know, like depend on, for example. So that you can look after the word and before the word to see which is the best fit grammatically. So, okay, it's the same thing. Yeah, I think am I right in thinking that the Russian state exam is very similar to FCE anyway? Is that correct? Because I think FCE have, they have like a school version of FCE and an adult version of FCE. And they're the same format, but probably with different subjects. So like the reading would be more directed towards children or adults. So I think the whole format of FCE is very similar to Russian state exam, possibly. Oh, it is. Okay. Yeah. So this is a really good thing and a good thing to teach, you know, if children are doing school exams, to learn what follows. Because obviously, it's like a really, it's a sort of kind of a little trick for the exam. So obviously you need to understand the meaning of the text. That helps. But if you don't understand the subject completely, and some of the vocabulary is a bit strange, if you know what comes after and you know the structures, then usually you can choose the correct word. Okay, so that is always quite helpful. Okay, does anybody have any questions about this subject or anything not sure about? So it's fairly straightforward. There's not too much to have to remember really. It's just getting used to using the structures. So I often say to people, if they're not sure once they've learnt these new things, is to write themselves a few example sentences. Structuring essays is very difficult, isn't it, for students? But I always try and teach to, how to have a plan. So, to have your introduction, and if it's like do you have, in these exams, do you have for and against essays and things like this? Or like advantages and disadvantages? So we usually say you have your introduction, and if it's advantages or disadvantages type essay, you have your introduction, then you say the good points, the bad points, and then a summary. And you try and structure it like that and learn a few useful phrases to put in it. So, to learn your linking words, the contrast words and such, like, just to have some kind of structure and some kind of base before you start your exam. So you have if you have these structures in place, if you know the structures, then it's easy to put them into the text. So I always teach the structures and then show them how to put them into the text, so that you know what kind of essay you have to write, and then how you can use them within it. Do they have the use of English question as well? And is the speaking and listening, is that all the same kind of structure as well? So talking about a picture and then questions about yourself and discussing things, is that all the same or is that different?
Wow.
I don't know. I haven't seen a full Russian state test before. Okay, so are there any questions at all? Would anyone like to know anything else? So just remember, I'll run through it once more. Okay, in spite of and despite are the same meaning. Okay, and are used in the same way. So in spite of and despite, follow it with a noun or verb in ing form. You can use it at the beginning or the middle. If you use although, even though, in spite of the fact that, which is just too long, but okay, follow it with a verb and a subject. Okay, they can also be used at the beginning or in the middle. Okay, they all show contrast. They all give the same meaning. Okay, yes, yeah. Learning the linking words is a really good thing to do, and vocabulary, because it's on the subject. So they all can go beginning or the middle, and they all show contrast. Okay. I suppose, yes, it depends on what the subject is they have to write about. So vocabulary is quite difficult to thing, but learning linking words is an easy way of those, because I suppose vocabulary, it depends on the essay, so it can be difficult, but if you can learn linking words, then that helps to make the essay writing a bit smoother and a bit more coherent. Okay, so all of them show contrast. They can all go at the beginning or in the middle, and it's what comes after that's important. Despite, in spite of, noun or ing, although, even though, and though, verb and subject, and despite the fact that, and verb and subject if you want to use it, but it's very long, so not many people use it. Okay, and even though gives a little bit more emphasis than although. Okay, so that should be helpful. If you're not sure, try and write some practice sentences so that you try to stay in your head. That's what I always say to my students with new vocabulary or new grammar structures. It's the best way of learning something. You can, if you have someone to speak to, then speak to them, and if you don't have anyone to speak to, just try and write some sentences down or speak to yourself. I do. Okay, if nobody has any questions, I will leave it there. We're going to do another 20 minutes on Friday. Going to do vocabulary on Friday. So if this works for you, we're going to do 20 minutes on grammar once a week and 20 minutes on vocabulary once a week. So 2 short ones. So if you have any questions, any subjects you want to cover, just let us know beforehand and then I will try and cover it for you. Okay? So have a lovely evening and I'll see you on Friday. And I'll see you in the morning, Arena. Take care. Bye-bye.
Number.